Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this media briefing. I am Lisa Lord. We will be addressed by Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley, as well as the Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honourable Dale Marshall, as well as Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, the Honourable Colin Jordan. Now, a range of issues will be discussed, including the introduction of the minimum wage, as well as some clarification to the Curfew Directive number 7 as it relates specifically to this Easter weekend. We will begin with a statement from the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good evening to all Barbadians. It is a pleasure to be here this evening. I am conscious that I'm coming into your house on the eve of one of the holiest weekends of the year, and therefore I hope that we will not keep too much of your time distracted tonight as you prepare for this long Easter weekend and as you reflect on the season of Easter. This evening I'm actually going to take a different approach. I've just come out of a 5-hour meeting with the social partnership where we've addressed a range of issues, some of which relates to COVID, of course, and then broader developmental issues. And rather than simply address you tonight, as I normally do, I'm going to give the media a chance to ask some questions. And in fairness, yes, there are colleague ministers here, but I've asked them to just join me, and I think Minister Strawn will also join us. But I want to be able to address a number of the things as you raise them and we address them, the burning issues of the country. So over to you, Lisa, and we'll take the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm upset we've changed the format slightly. Joining us from the media, as the Prime Minister indicated, we have changed the format somewhat. We have Trevor Thorpe from CBC, Ian Bourne from the Bajan Reporter, Randy Bennett, Barbados Today, and Barry Allen from the Nation newspaper. Your questions.
Bennett from Barbados Today, sorry. You just mentioned that you came out of a 5-hour meeting, the social partnership. We know that members of the private sector had expressed some concerns in terms of the minimum wage coming into effect from tomorrow. Were you able to iron out some of those issues during the meeting?
Well, we had a very cordial meeting. I mean, I think it is no secret that we're not necessarily on the same page as to the timing of it. But I think the private sector themselves have also reflected that they too support the fact that the persons who are in fact not receiving what we consider to be an appropriate living wage in this country should have the benefit of so doing. And the last time, in fact, that we had a minimum payment set for shop assistance was almost a decade ago or more. And the reality is that in that time, prices have gone up by more than 40%. So I think that we're all agreed that first and foremost, one, the hotel sector is already paying most people above the minimum wage. The agricultural sector is already paying most people above the minimum wage. The public sector, with the exception of a relief watchman, and that change will have to be made for the relief watchman, every other post in the public sector is above minimum wage. We do have people who are working in the retail sector, in gas stations, as domestics, and we have to ask ourselves, will we really postpone what is the right thing to do? Because as I've said over and over, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. It's perhaps fortuitous that I'm speaking to you tonight, because 83 years ago today, a group of men met in Bay Street at Martineau House to determine how best they were going to advance the causes of the working class of Barbados, with 98% of the people living in this country being working class in those days. They determined then that they would push for an agenda that was very much against the status quo. And indeed, it eventually led to the passage of major pieces of labor legislation that would not have gone down well at the time at which it was passed. So we know that there's an adjustment, but I ask myself, if you are paying somebody who is working with you at $7 an hour, and for the additional 8 hours you must move to 150. I know that it is an adjustment, but our business is never sustainable unless we are carrying all of the people that we need to carry, including treating the people who work with us appropriately. So I trust and pray that Barbadians will understand that this is a moment for adjustment. This is a moment for right sizing and doing the right thing. And there may be some adjustment, some consequences, but we're satisfied that in the long run it will work. And let me also say this. People who have money and who receive additional money tend to save it straight off. People who are struggling to survive, if they receive funds, more often than not will need to spend it. And therefore, one of the experiences that we've seen in countries where a minimum wage has been introduced is that in truth and in fact it has led to increased disposable income for the class of person who is benefiting. And to that extent, those persons have been able to contribute to having greater economic activity being pursued as a result of their spending. So I trust and pray that we will, as a society, recognize that this is the right thing to do, and that there are certain people in this country that to ask them, honestly, to live on $48 a day times 5 is really too much in this environment, particularly with prices over the course of the last decade having gone up.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister. This is Ian Bourne, Beijing reporter. I'm addressing a matter that I've noticed being brought up on both social media and also had been asked me on Telegram and WhatsApp. And this is in regards to the powers of requisition in the Emergency Directive number 7. People are expressing concern over the fact that there doesn't appear to be a statute of limitations or level of compensation for using of property or means of transportation. In going forward, would there be an amendment to this that would meet with everybody reaching some form of accord?
Attorney General answered this question already, and I'm going to let him repeat it. You know, they say that politics is the art of repetition, and perhaps we need to repeat ourselves on these issues. AG?
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good evening, members of the press. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good evening, members of the press, and to Barbados. First of all, there is an error that is being repeated when people say that we have just passed this particular kind of power in the COVID order as if it is something that is new. That is not correct at all. In every single COVID order that we have brought into force since March of last year, these particular powers have been included. Now, let me remind Barbadians that this is a state of emergency. And while it may not be the kind of emergency that that you might think of when you think of a hurricane or war or anything of that sort, the state has to have reserve powers in a situation which might arise, which would call on it to do extraordinary things. Let me remind you, for example, that during the course of the management of this COVID pandemic in this current year, we had a senior citizens home that had, I think most of the individuals there had come down with COVID, and it became vital for the government to take charge of that facility. If the owners of that facility had refused the government the opportunity to take charge of it, we would have had a serious problem. It is in circumstances like that that you utilize these reserve powers. Now, it isn't new to us, it isn't generally known, but every year as we prepare for the hurricane season, in the possibility that the Governor General might need to do a state of emergency proclamation, we also prepare similar powers. The government of Barbados is constrained by its constitution. We cannot and will not take anyone's property without compensation. You will notice that the order does not say that we will acquire it. It says requisition, which which suggests and which conveys the impression that for as long a period of time as needed, the government may be required to take extraordinary steps and access facilities and assets that it does not have in its control. We've been very fortunate that we've not had to go to that extreme, but it is important that we have these reserve powers available, and let me stress that they have been there from the very beginning. Every single COVID order has been gazetted, so this is not something at all that the government of Barbados has surreptitiously tried to slip in to the COVID arrangements regime. It's been there from the very outset, and we've not had to use it. But as I said, in a state of emergency, a government must have a set of reserve powers in case worse comes to worse. We'd be able to act as required in a given situation.
Thank you for the clarity, because as the Prime Minister pointed out, sometimes some people may not hear. So I appreciate the clarification.
To you, Ian, may I say to you, Ian, it is really an insurance clause, that's all. And the country has to be ready for any eventuality. But I think that, as the AG said, everything that we have done has been fully transparent, and therefore the public does not need to worry about not knowing. But equally, if something happens in the middle of the night, as has happened, if something happens on a weekend, as has happened, to requisition simply means to use and not to take over ownership, as the AG said. So I'd like Barbadians to appreciate, and as we get into even the directive, because a lot of the talk that I heard after last weekend was that the government has issued and made it stronger, and the government has done this. I deliberately walked this afternoon, tonight, with the statutory instrument, largely because I had to go through this with many persons over the weekend and during the course of the week, to be able to show them how to read a statutory instrument, and some of them may even be former parliamentarians, so that this is not a case where people will feel funny or stupid. But it's just that legal language, as the AG will tell you, has a way of being very sometimes stilted and archaic. So they'll start off by saying that a curfew is imposed from X time to Y time, from 9 p.m. at night to 5 a.m. in the morning, from the 28th of March to the 11th of April. And then it will tell you that no person can do or shall leave his residence to do X, Y, Z, except. But when you get to the except, a normal person would expect to read what the exceptions are. But what does the language say? The person is the owner, operator, or business of an establishment set out in paragraph 6 or 7. So you've got to turn the page 3 or 4 pages and look for paragraph 6 and 7. Paragraph 6 is those businesses that can be allowed to operate, like baking bread, like cleaning services, like farms between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., or fuel manufacturers, or gasoline stations, or hotels, villas, and other rental accommodation, or pharmaceutical manufacturers. But when you read that clause boldly, it says nobody can do this except. And then when you get to 7, it then tells you, okay, about food services and restaurants being able to operate from Monday to Sunday, which is in fact a complete exception, because of course, in spite of there being a limitation on the legitimate reasons why people can leave their houses, we say these are the things that they can do. So the language is complex, is archaic, but sometimes I suppose we have to break it down. And in fact, far from strengthening the restrictions, the government in fact eased the restrictions. One, by allowing the curfew to finish at 5 in the morning instead of 6, and 2, by recognizing that restaurants and fast food operations could still function on a Sunday. People ask, why didn't we do supermarkets and other retail? It's largely because in this guava season, we've been going for 12 months, and there is fatigue, there is tiredness for COVID and the restrictions. We get it. But there's equally fatigue on the part of workers, like supermarket workers, like gas station workers, like people who have been going every day. And we felt that, particularly given the desire by the Ministry of Health to continue to be able to ease the numbers of persons on the road, that we would have a situation on Sundays that would reduce the traffic that would have cause to go on the road in this country. So there's no magic about it. And as to Easter, we all know what has happened with weekends. and what has happened, with holiday seasons, not just in Barbados, but globally. We all know the people who are waiting with bated breath to see what will happen with spring break in the US. We all know what happened with other vacation periods or holiday weekends that we had. And I would simply say this: we have done too well. We are too close to the end. And I want to give these statistics to show you that while we have done so well, for us to sacrifice everything now before we've actually gotten there would be unfortunate. And that is why we've worked so hard to be able to get the vaccines here. We've vaccinated just under 64,000 persons, and we expect other persons to be vaccinated as we go forward. Indeed, I think the exact number is 63,715 people have been vaccinated. We also said that we would have a number of measurements that we would use to guide our performance. We would like, ideally, not more than 25 new COVID cases per 100,000 over a 2-week period, the last 2-week period. What has been our reality? That in the last 2 weeks, we've had 66.8 cases per 100,000, which is down from the previous 2 weeks when it was 113. Now, you would appreciate that that is a significant reduction from a month ago. Similarly, we said that we wanted a stable or decreasing trend of new cases compared to the previous 14 days. You've seen the dashboards, you've seen that we've generally been decreasing. We said that we wanted a case fatality rate that is stable or decreasing compared to the previous 14-day period. We have it stable, and there is no one who would want to be able to say that we have zero more than myself, because as I told you, the one thing I've not learned to manage in the last 12 months has been persons passing away from us for this. We said that we would do more than 1,200 tests per 100,000 inhabitants in the previous 7 days. We've done approximately 1,200 tests per 100,000 inhabitants in the last week. But I want to say to you that I am anxious for us to continue to increase the numbers. But the reality is that we also need more persons coming forward willing to volunteer to be tested if we are going to get those numbers back up. What we are getting are people testing because they're primary and secondary contacts. Now we need to be able to broaden that base, and even in discussions with the unions, I think, and the teachers, I think that they have put on the table the need for more regular testing. And I've said to the Minister of Education, of course we have the tests, and if the unions can identify the persons who want the tests, then we're in a position to facilitate the testing of the unions, of the members, teachers, and also of the children in circumstances where the NCPTA also wants to have them tested. We said that we did not want more than 5% positivity among all COVID-19 tests carried out in the previous 7 days. Positivity has generally been below 5%, with the exception of 1 day, I think, for the majority of the last 2 weeks. And today, I think it is at just over 2%. Yesterday, it was at 1.6%. In fact, most of the days, it's been under 2%. We said that we wanted the percentage of cases investigated in 24 hours of cases being assigned to have high, medium, low risk, and we are over 80% with respect to that target. We said that the percentage of cases isolated in 48 hours of cases being assigned, once they were assigned, more than 80% of those persons are being dealt with. And the present occupancy of the ICU isolation, we want it at less than 75% in order to ensure that what we have does not overtake our health system. And in truth and in fact, we have 18% in the ICU at Harrison's Point and 43% in the high dependency unit. And generally, we said we want a general high adherence of the public to the measures, the protocol measures, keeping distance, wearing the mask. I think all Barbadians can attest to the fact that the level of compliance has far, far greater than it was when we started on this journey. So, my friends, we are not yet where we want to be, but we are way down the road getting there. And all I ask this country to do is for us to remember that at this point in time, do not sacrifice the tremendous gains that we've made, and do not let us for a weekend or 2 weekends or 3 weekends. You know why? Because there are so many more years for us to live. There are so many more things for us to do. And the sad part about it is, if you want to know why it is not worth it, just think how fast a weekend goes. And to know that that period of time that goes in a flash of an eye doesn't come back to you. But if you do the wrong things, or if you do things that compromise it, then you will go back. I watched what's happening in Martinique and Guadeloupe. They had carnival, and they're now facing a spike. And even in St. Lucia, they're worried about that spike because people in Martinique are 10 minutes away by boat, and there is a very porous border, as you know. So I really do want us to stay focused. We're not there, but we can get there. Barry, I think you were about to ask a question.
Yes, Prime Minister, good evening. A two-pronged question. The first part of the question is, has the government of Barbados been able to confirm procurement of our second batch of the AstraZeneca vaccine? And the second part of my question is, has government started any negotiations looking to actually use a secondary vaccine, not AstraZeneca again, like Johnson & Johnson, that would require only one inoculation aimed at immunization? Thank you.
What you really want from me is an explanation as to what happened with the vaccines. So let me get it to you. Because it's not a second batch. It's not a second batch. The truth is that we have about 4 irons in the fire, and I think I said that the last time I was here. But I also indicated to you that I was not speaking because until it hasn't landed. And part of the difficulty, and I think those of you particularly in the media see it every day, the stories that are coming out across the world, and particularly Europe and elsewhere, as to what is happening with vaccines and vaccine wars and vaccine misinformation and vaccine nationalism, has made this perhaps one of the most difficult exercises that I've ever engaged in 30 years. Having said that, we expect to get a shipment from COVAX, as we indicated, and we're not sure exactly when that's coming. We were told it was coming a couple times before. We will await, hopefully, that arrival, and that will be 33,000 in the first shipment of that COVAX set of vaccines. We have 2 orders separately commercially, and those are AstraZeneca. And then you would have seen earlier this week the Africa Medical Supplies Platform the Africa Union signed a contract with Johnson & Johnson for the provision of Johnson & Johnson 220 million doses. When I chaired CARICOM last year, I negotiated with the Africa Medical Supplies Platform access for the Caribbean community to go on that platform. Not just in those days, last year, it wasn't simply about vaccines, it was about PPE, it was about ventilators, it was about other therapeutics, medicine, etc. And in those circumstances, what happened was that they agreed to give the Caribbean community 1.8 million doses of what they're getting for Africa. Of course, Africa has 1.4 billion people. So it is an act of generosity. We pay for it, but the bottom line is that they took us along with their quota. What we have discovered is that, and Barbados put in for that one, our share in that is just about 60,000 doses, but we have asked for the Johnson & Johnson one. Just as I was coming on air, between leaving LESC and coming here, I saw that there has been a story that there has been some difficulties with Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines out of the United States of America in a manufacturing plant. So that just gives you an idea of how these things can so easily disrupt the chain of supply. I'm confident that at some point in the next few weeks we will have access to some. As to exact day, I'm not even going there, my brother. I'm not going there because this world, nobody expected a ship to block up the Suez Canal for almost a week. And we're learning that there are too many variables that can easily disrupt supply and logistics chain. So let us hold off. On the other vaccines, we received a communication from the President of China that they will donate 30,000 Sinopharm vaccines to Barbados, and that obviously they're more available for us to purchase. We have been in deep discussions. The Minister of Health is here too, and he has been leading the effort with those discussions with me, with the Chinese, and I want to thank him for that. We have indicated that as soon as SAID, which is the Committee of Scientific Experts, I believe, can approve Sinopharm, or and we have that scientific evidence. That's going to allow us then to have our own national committee approve it. There have been discussions in the region with Sputnik, and while Sputnik also has not been approved by WHO yet, and we haven't put in any formal orders, we've had general discussions, and the Lancet journal, which is one of the preeminent journals for public health and medical practitioners, has rated the Sputnik one very high. And in fact, only this morning in the international media, I saw that Chancellor Merkel and President Macron may be talking to President Putin about accessing the Sputnik vaccine in Europe, because they recognize that they need to fill the gap. Similarly, we've had discussions. I had an excellent meeting with the President of Cuba about just over a month ago, and we're waiting also for them to finish their work. So, short answer, Barry, the immediate one is AstraZeneca, but we do anticipate that Johnson & Johnson could be part of our mix. We do anticipate that that once Sinopharm and Sputnik are approved, that can also be part of the mix, and that we probably will have more than enough AstraZeneca, as I said, to be able to deal with ourselves, as well as to ensure that we wait and see what happens, of course, with persons under 18 and 16 to 18. I know that they're working on something that probably won't be available before the end of summer with respect to that age group. So I hope that answers you in part. You know, there's a biblical saying that we must learn to walk by sight and not only by faith. I wish I could tell you that we were walking fully by sight. We're walking by advice that this is the road we should go down. But at the same time, so much is changing in the global community within a day, far less on a daily basis, that it is impossible for me to tell you otherwise. But you know the government is committed. That's why we were able to bring 100,000 vaccines here from the government of India, and that's why Barbados, even as we speak, has one of the highest per capita rates of vaccinations in the world at the moment. And it's not something that I want to boast about, but it is something that we need to do if we're going to turn the corner and bring back some realistic chance of persons being able to engage in meaningful activity to support their families and to support their communities, and for us to support the country. I think I've expressed we've lost $2 billion in economic activity in the last year. Our GDP, nominal GDP, went from 10.5 billion last March to 8.5 billion as I speak to you. We also had a reduction in revenue, apart from the accounting adjustments, of roughly about $600 million in tax revenue. That has hurt us, while at the same time our expenditure has remained constant, largely because we've had to bring on additional personnel and do additional spending in order to prepare for COVID. So we, like everyone in Barbados, we're tired of COVID. We get it, but we're not there yet, and we just need to stay the course. When the Spanish flu hit 100 years ago, it was 1918 to 1920, 3 calendar years. Okay, and there's nobody living today who has gone through this who probably was active in 1918 to 20, because you would have had to have been 1 or 2 years old, even if you're 100 now. And there's no way of removing risk unless you go to Mars or unless you're 6 foot under. So I think we're all agreeing on that.
Quick follow-up, Prime Minister. The 2 commercial orders of AstraZeneca, where are they being sourced from?
Out of I believe, and those have changed. At one point was being sourced out of Europe, then we were told it was back to India. And I think that they are literally juggling. And to tell you a specific answer, Barry, would be to lie to you. But we do know, and we have sent off all the requirements. I think up to yesterday, the Ministry of Health's permanent secretary would have received a call to advance the processing of one of them. So do like me, sit tight and wait, my brother. But they're coming.
Thanks, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kezia and the Starcom Network. Just wanted to find out, has there been any progress with regards to the concerns with teachers' unions in relation to resuming face-to-face classes?
I wasn't aware that there was another major issue. I think that both sides have expressed. The matter came to Cabinet last week, and we've determined that, look, we have to start back school. you know, the greatest tragedy in all this is, for me, is the children. I spent 7 years as Minister of Education, and I cannot imagine what it is like for those kids, especially those who've gone into new schools, who've not been able to settle, who've not been able to do anything. And to have to do this, I know how hard it is for me to do work by Zoom every day, far less children to be in a class doing Zoom every day. So I think we've heard the concerns, we've heard about the need for additional testing, we've heard about the need for ensuring great safety. There is nobody who wants more safety than us, because we don't want to see any increase in cases. But I think we are agreed that we have to go back to school, and that we need to be able to do so in a safe manner. That's why not all 100% of the school population is going back at the same time, but we're trying to do so in consultation with the teachers, with the persons. But at the end of the day, the government has to make decisions that is in the best interest of those kids. And right now, those kids have lost 1 year of their life. The good news is, does it really affect a child 40 years from now, 30 years from now, if they left school at 16, 17, or 18? Probably not. But at this side of the equation, you want to get out, and it looks like, oh no, another extra year. But what matters more than anything else is the foundation, or what the Bajans would call, old-time Bajans would call, the early groceries. Do they have that foundation of knowledge that will allow them to continue to learn and learn? And have they been exposed to the other social and emotional learning targets that you don't get a chance to reinforce if you're doing online teaching? So this is a difficult moment, not just for Barbados, but for countries across the world. But I'm confident that we can do it, and we can do it safely and well. And I look forward to working with all of the stakeholders in being able to manage this transition.
Okay, quick follow-up question. With regards to other sectors who still remain closed, for example, gyms, who've been appealing for the chance to be able to operate once again, indicating that they can operate in a safe manner in light of COVID. Is there any other ease and restrictions coming which will allow such businesses to open? And then also after that, also in terms of Carnival for this year, what are we?
You're galloping down. You're galloping down the road fast, though, very fast. So I would suggest that we deal with school and children before we get to crop over and jump up. And I'm not going to do like Prime Minister Gonzalez and say that if you take a jab, you get to do a work up. But what I will say is, look.
All right, so first thing is the sectors.
Yeah, I got that, and that's why I'm going back to the numbers I quoted to you earlier. We want to get not more than 25 new COVID cases per 100,000. We may not get exactly there, but the mere fact that we moved from 113 cases for the 2 weeks before the last 2 weeks, okay, which would be the beginning of March, to 66.8 cases for the last 2 weeks of March, tells us that we're trending in that direction. We've made the directive possible for the persons who are in the same gyms to be able to do outside work, because you can exercise from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. And this has nothing to do with the beaches or parks. The beaches or parks are 6 to 9 and 3 to 6. But there's nothing, in fact, far from that, the AG made it possible that you can actually go outside and train. Now, you and I know that, yes, you can lift weights. So if you've done like me, sometimes when I didn't have weights and I'm on vacation, I lift canned food. You do all kinds of things to lift and to exercise. And I'm not meaning to be facetious or anything, but I think that the notion of people heaving and hoeing within small spaces, you can't really do that with a mask on easily. In fact, I would think that that would put pressure on the person who's doing it with a mask. So unless the exercise is outside, which it can be, then it's going to be difficult. I would say to them, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And similarly to pleasure cruise and boat owners, we're getting there. Water sports operators, we met with some of them on Friday afternoon, and they're understanding. And I go back to the literature generally in public health. What have they said in all of the literature? Shut down sharp and open back up gradually, because you do not want to compromise the opportunities that you have to keep on the straight and narrow. Okay, and as for crop over, as I said, check me a little later. And while I don't want to do like Prime Minister Gonzalez. The reality is, if we get herd immunity by a certain time, then all things will be considered. But to get herd immunity means 60 to 70% of our population needs to be vaccinated. And right now, there has been a very, very generous demand on the part of Bajans to take it. But the bottom line is we've slightly paused because we need some more in order to be able to continue the vaccinations apace. We have a mobile team doing a few, which is why you'll see a few adding on every day. But for the most part, we're probably another week or two before we ramp up again in large numbers.
Prime Minister, you said earlier, I want to go back to the minimum wage, that you had a meeting with the social partnership this afternoon. Is the door now closed where that is concerned with regards to government and the social partnership and what they were asking for January, implementation of January 2022?
The Gazette came out this morning and last night, 30th of March, and it is effective the 1st of April. So yes, but may I put it in context, please, Trevor? At different stages, everybody has had a chance. So there's nothing new that is being represented, and I don't mean that to be dismissive at all. But the Minimum Wage Board, the Blue Ribbon Committee, in fact, was tripartite in nature, but they also took submissions from persons, and then when it went back out, the order went back out, and persons also submitted a third time again. So we've had 3 different sets of times for persons to say, look, we do not support this. But after a while, you have to govern, and you have to decide. And our judgment, their judgment was January next year, our judgment is April this year. We recognize that there are other things that we've had to do. For example, the government is spending significant sums of money in both grant and loans to be able to support the tourism sector. The government has also spent a significant set of money to be able to provide basic support to all kinds of people. In fact, more so than most countries in the region. When you really start to add up what we have done, we feel as well that we cannot leave out the persons who are at the very edge of the margin and who cannot make it easily, and to tell them to wait another 8 months to be able to get another $10, $12, $15 a day, which becomes absolutely critical to them, particularly given the fact that they have not had increases in a whole range of other issues, but prices have gone up. It's not fair. It's not conscionable. And I must tell you, therefore, that as I speak to you tonight, as I said, 83 years ago, the Barbados Labour Party was formed in Bay Street. And I know that we were formed to be able to make a difference to the lives of working Barbadians. And we have done that. But I'm happy and proud to lead a party tonight that continues to commit to make life easier for those who can least protect themselves. And that has been the hallmark of this country. That is who we are. So that, yes, it is going to be discomforting for some for now. Some people may argue that the $10 or $15 is the equivalent of 2 drinks or a chicken and chips meal. But reality is, while that might be 2 drinks or a chicken and chips meal for somebody, it is the difference between being able to put food on the table or being able to pay a light bill or being able to pay a water bill. Okay? Minister Jordan, I think, wants to add to that. I don't have any. No. We easy, Star. Come. Put down the mic.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I am not adding necessarily, but just to say, I think the focus of the question had to do with the social partnership and how government is responding. The statement was made about the door being closed. I just want to give an illustration to indicate that this government led by the Prime Minister is one that responds. The example I'm going to give to you is that we got response from the private sector, the employers in what we call the security services sector. And those employers said to us, the order as set out is really the order taken from the Shops Act, and it really bears no relationship to the business model in the security sector. So you will see that in the gazetted order that came out last night, the second schedule looks different from the second schedule in the draft order that was published about between 47 and 50 days ago. And that was a result of government being approached, looking at what was put on the table, it resulted in us going back to consult again with the security sector. We also consulted again with the trade union, and coming out of that, we made an adjustment to the second schedule of the order. So this government listens. Prime Minister would have indicated that everything we heard, almost every other thing we had heard before. But based on that representation from the security sector, we made an adjustment. And I just wanted to share that to say that this government continues to listen and continues to respond.
Are there any more questions at this time?
I have a question for the Attorney General. Sorry, Ian.
Go ahead, Barry.
Hi, Attorney General, in the past days, there have been changes to the directives, and you've had to come to the public to either clarify or give some clarity to what is going on. And I find it, especially in the retail sector, that there's some misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the directives as they come out. I mean, what do you think your administration can do, or what kind of platform you can put in place to make this a little easier for these sectors not to be so confused when these directives come out, or when there are some little changes made along the way as you guys see fit?
Certainly fielded a lot of queries, and not just from the retail sector, from just about everybody under the sun. And I think that we've done a reasonably good job in disseminating the information. Certainly the Department of Public Affairs has been putting out a number of snippets so as to be able to express in simple language what is the status quo. As you know, and you've been part of many of these opportunities, we've not run from the public face in terms of coming out and interfacing with the press. I've certainly gone on the calling programs. So I think we've done an awful lot. I believe that the error tends to be, though, and I don't want to be critical of anybody, I think in some instances, as the Prime Minister is saying, people need to look at what is there. And you know, I'm even having to explain the directives to attorneys, and I ask them, well, have you read the entire directive? And they say, no, I only looked at one paragraph, you know. So I think we have to walk with each other and hold each other's hands. And certainly as the AG and as part of this administration, I think that we have bent over backwards to try our best to talk with people, to put information out there. Whenever we find that there's an area that seems to be a little gray, we've made sure that GIS and other agencies put out memes, things on social media, no more than 5 or 6 words, to try to express it easily. We remain available to the public. I get scores and scores of emails per hour. I know the Prime Minister does. Sometimes she bumps them up to me. But that's what we do, and that's who we are. So I'm sorry that there are entities that find the directives confusing, but let me finish by saying this. This current directive has changed very, very little from the last directive. And therefore, if we went through the last directive with some reasonably good understanding of what obtained, it is a little bit puzzling that in a situation where all we've done is to give an extra hour in the day, that there'd be this confusion that persists. Part of the problem, I suspect, is that people anticipated that we were going to tighten up. You might well remember that when it became evident that a new directive was coming out, the rumor went out that last weekend was going to be a total shutdown. It came out of nowhere, and I think that just built into a bigger and bigger wave. And by the time the directive was actually signed into law by the Prime Minister, we then had to fight to say to people, well, you know, you're mistaken. We haven't shut down. If anything, we've given more flexibility than ever before. Sorry that there's confusion. I'm sure that as a government we could always do better. We could always improve. But I'm reasonably satisfied with the efforts that we've made to make it clear. And, we talk to the social partnership and other people just to let them know in simple terms what's happening.
If I may say, Barry, that I get it in terms of the fatigue, and I think that's half the problem. And people are therefore speculating, people want to see the end of this. I get it. There is one issue that I think we can advise the public on. We did have serious representations about bakeries this weekend, in particular being able to sell on a long weekend. And in addition, therefore, the directive speaks to only bakeries being able to allow to bake, but we've agreed that they should be able to sell. And we know that this is a weekend where Barbadians like hot cross buns and all of the different other things, and the small things that we can still enjoy. So I've asked the Attorney General to provide an exemption for the bakeries to be able to sell on this weekend. Throughout the Fridays, it's really the bank holidays and the Sundays, because of course they can sell any other day of the week.
Are there any further questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick one, wanting to know if anything is going to be done the same way that vendors were helped, if entertainment community like ancillary or auxiliary people, the backup singers, the makeup artists who've been unemployed for a year or more, is there going to be a similar ease program for them?
Trying to carry, we've been responding to a number of persons. This has been a difficult year. We will continue to do as best we can. A number of them also were assisted through the household mitigation unit, and then some were able to put in some projects. Some did some training late last year. We're looking to see how best we can continue to assist as many people as possible. But as I said, we are asking Barbadians who can to also help, because the real issue in this thing is the length and intensity of the battle. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not been easy at all. I mean, this has been some of the roughest months that we've ever had. But by the same token, we're trying to keep as many people's heads above water, and where we know and where we can assist, we will do so. It will not be what people would like ideally, but it will be sufficient to keep people's heads above water. I should say to you that I also asked the National Training Initiative to start a series of free webinars for Barbadian businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses in particular. Large ones can usually take care of themselves and buy in the consultancy services that they need. But the question is, how are we going to get through this period? How are we going to innovate? How are we going to cope in challenging times for a business? Is there a need, for example, for persons to discount and to recognize that it is better to discount and sell some stock rather than letting the stock spoil and then having to write it off in accounting terms? How can we get goods moved? How can we innovate in other ways? So, in fact, and I'm hoping that we can get some of the regional titans in business and even beyond, so that they can come and share freely, because we recognize that part of the difficulty is that people are, in the words of Peter Tosh, you're down-pressed almost with the weight of what has happened in the last year. And people perhaps can be given tips as to how best they can innovate and deal with business to keep it going. The one thing we know is that as far as possible, we want to keep people's heads above water, because if a business closes, then it is that much more difficult to get it started again and to get it engaging and doing the kind of trade in goods or services in under 2 to 3 years. So it is in our interest to keep as many alive as possible.
The media one more time to ensure that there are no more questions.
Lisa, if there are none, I'd just like to close off by
Sure,
saying that
PM.
I'd like to thank Barbadians. You know, I keep saying so over and over, it is such an honor to lead the people of this nation. There are so many other countries where people say that it is difficult to get people to work with, etc. And it has been my experience that we are some of the most reasonable people, and that so long as we know what is the mission and what is needed to be able to protect and to be able to promote and to propel, us Bajans generally will listen. This last 3 months has been difficult, but we are turning the corner. And I trust and pray that our continued consultations, I'll be back at you shortly again. This afternoon we took a long session. This was the 4th This was the fourth session in the last 2 weeks trying to deal with the protocols for vaccinated persons coming into the country. We were able to deal with the University of the West Indies, the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, the tourism persons, but not just the hoteliers, persons who work, vendors, persons who work in the taxi arena. We were able this evening also to engage a broader social partnership. We invited the leader of the Democratic Labour Party, Mr. Pizzo, who came. We invited the head of the Christian Council, the head of the Evangelical Council. But these matters have now to go to Cabinet, and therefore we'll address them next week as we go forward. But I think that there's a sense that if we just keep focused now, don't go and put yourself at risk in trying to say you want better, because in putting yourself at risk to say that you want to stop all of these measures, we will only propel ourselves back into a deep position. That is not what we want. So I'd like to thank Barbadians and to wish them, as we go into this Easter weekend, to know that yes, it is not necessarily the kind of Easter that we're fully accustomed to. I do expect that there will be some measures that will be similar. There's nothing that stops persons from doing some of the things that we would normally do, but equally the level of entertainment and the level of gathering, even in families, will have to be moderated, but not because we want to be difficult or to punish anybody, but because we want to get back to own and control our lives as soon as possible. It won't be a return to the old normal. We know that. We know enough has happened to know that that will not be the case. But what will happen is that we ought to be able to pursue our lives and to support our families and our communities as we have become accustomed to doing. And we can do that if we do it together as usual. So as we've said, and in the words of Minister of Health, there shall be no retreat, no surrender. And as I say to you on each occasion, with God on our side, we shall have no doubts or fears, and that we shall move up, inspired, exulting, free. God bless this nation as we go into this Easter weekend. God bless each and every person living here, and may we continue to move from strength to strength as we fight this awful pandemic. Thank you, and God bless.
And thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley. We were also joined by Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honourable Dale Marshall, as well as the Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, the Honourable Colin Jordan, as well as members of the media. And thank you for joining us. Good evening.